Alright guys, BLM here, back with a new video. We're back with a video that I've talked about doing for a while now. I just never got around to doing it, but here we're going to be doing my Amazing Race winner rankings. So in this video, we'll obviously be ranking all 31 winners of the Amazing Race up to this point. And to be honest, this is a video that I've been holding off for a while now because, to be honest, I feel like it's much harder to talk about the winner rankings of the Amazing Race than it is with Survivor and with Big Brother. With both of those, it's very easy to point out certain strategic moves, certain elements of their game that demonstrate why they are better than certain other winners, why they had more control or dominance than other winners. But here on the Amazing Race, it's a bit tougher to do that without just straight up going to the facts, without straight up going to the actual results that we got. But like my other winner rankings, I will be ranking them on dominance. Now, it won't be the same dominance as like Survivor and Big Brother, obviously. With those games, it's more so about the amount of control that you had on how the game played out. Here on the Amazing Race, it's more so on how well you performed consistently throughout the race. And this won't be a ranking of how I feel like these teams are as racers overall in the grand scheme of the Amazing Race. It's more so how I feel like they race on their one specific season. Like, there are teams that I think probably do worse on a return than teams that are below them. However, I feel like on the one specific race that they won, they did a better job overall. So that's how I'm going to be approaching this list. So let's get started off with number 31. So at 31, we have the worst winners of the Amazing Race, in my personal opinion, and that is Josh and Brent from the Amazing Race 21. And their track record is just so bad. I mean, when looking at their results, I mean, their first few rounds, they were always like kind of in the middle of the pack, which is fine. But then they get saved by a non-elimination leg in leg 5, which, I mean, I will say non-elimination legs for me, obviously they're knocks against a winner's game, in my opinion. I mean, it's kind of similar to how I look at like an idol or like needing to win immunity in Survivor, where yes, those things are part of the game. Yes, they can save you, but they're a much more luck-based way of getting through the game than had you not been last on that specific leg. Now, obviously with the Amazing Race, there's so much luck that comes into it, much more than Survivor and Big Brother, which are also very luck dependent games. So for me, a non-elimination leg, yes, it does knock you down, but it's not a automatic like, oh, anyone that survived a non-elimination leg's at the very bottom, but it's still not great. And the reason why Josh and Brent are at the bottom is because if we look at every single leg after this, they are second to last every single time up until the finale. Like, they're literally 6th place at the final 7, 5th place both times at the final 6, which, mind you, they would have been eliminated had James and Abba not lost their passports. Final 5, they're in 4th place. Final 4, they're in 3rd place both times. And on the final leg, they miraculously win. And again, this is just such a luck-dependent win, in my opinion. They really had to get lucky at the non-elimination leg, had to get lucky that James and Abba lost their passports, just barely squeaked on by every other time, and then just somehow won the final leg. So for me, it's not really a win that I hold in high regard. They're here at number 31. Now at number 30, we have a team that I really like. I really like them, but I just feel like their race was pretty mediocre, and that is Amy and Maya, the winners of the Amazing Race 25. And I think the biggest problem for them, for me, is the fact that they really get saved in that penultimate leg. In the penultimate leg, they really had no reason to think they were going to survive. On any other season of the race, I mean, I guess outside of the next season where they do the same twist, they would have been eliminated at that leg. However, they decided to make the final leg a final 4 and have a mid-leg elimination, which was just weird. And Amy and Maya get saved because of that. If it wasn't for that, they would have been eliminated. On any other season, they would have been eliminated. So again, for me, that's kind of different than a non-elimination leg, where you know non-elimination legs are going to come into play in the middle of the race at any point. However, for there to be a non-elimination leg on the penultimate leg, in a situation where there's 4 racers left, where on every other season before that, there were only 3 racers in the final leg, and there having been a non-elimination leg just previous to this one is just completely ridiculous to me. I feel like this is a major knock against them for me, but also mixing that in with the fact that they never won a leg until the final leg, that's a knock. The fact that they did come second to last multiple times throughout the race, I believe 3 times total. And even outside of that, they were just in the middle of the pack for a lot of the race. So for me, I was never really too impressed with their race to begin with, but also mixing in the fact that they have that penultimate leg that is so bad of a knock against them, in my opinion, it does land them here at number 30. Now at number 29, we have the winners of the Amazing Race All-Stars. We have Eric and Danielle. And I always found their win really strange as well. I mean, they're another team that only won the final leg. They didn't win any other leg in the race. But I do think they performed better than Josh and Brent. I mean, they were kind of middle in the pack for a lot of the race. I mean, there were points where they were second to last. I mean, in the 5th leg, it was a non-elimination leg, but they still were second to last. They got second to last on both of the legs where Team Guido came in last and where they eventually got eliminated. But then again, a lot of that was due to the very unfair course structure at that point that really screwed over Team Guido. Made it so they pretty much had no chance of surviving there. They did get last on leg 10, and they did get second to last on leg 11, though that was a non-elimination leg. And then they did second on the penultimate leg and then won the final leg. So, I mean, like, again, there are some higher points in the race for them. I feel like they're a very rocky team, though they do have more high points than the teams that we already talked about. So they're here at number 29. Number 28, we have Dan and Jordan from the Amazing Race 16. And I gotta be honest, this is probably the winning team that I remember the least in terms of how well they did, like, individually. Like, looking at their track record, they were just very average for the first half of the race. They were always between the, like, 4 to 8 range in terms of the placements, but then they were able to get a second place finish on leg 7, but then really fall back to 5th place leg 8. They do win leg 9, but then again come in 3rd 2 times in a row at leg 10 and 11, and then eventually win the final leg. So, again, it's a very rocky road for them. I do think they're a bit more of a consistent team than the teams that we've already talked about. I mean, yes, they are towards the bottom of the pack a few times, but this is more so towards the end of the race. Like, a lot of these other teams were at the back of the pack earlier on. So I do think later on the race being in the back of the pack isn't as bad in my opinion. They do also win at least one leg before the finale, which is more I could say about the teams we've already talked about. And for me, from what I remember, I just don't remember them making any massive mistakes throughout the race that would really make me think less of them as races overall. I just think really they're just average racers in the grand scheme of things. So for me, they land at number 28. Now at number 27, we have a team that I personally love as characters. But again, as racers, they're very much a mixed bag, and that is Brooke and Scott. And Brooke and Scott are kind of another one of these teams that were like kind of just in the middle of the pack for a lot of the race, though they do have a couple points where they were second to last. But they do really pick it up at the end. They get second place in leg 10, and then they win the final 2 legs of the race. And to be honest, as a team, I always looked at Scott as the much better racer of the two. I think Scott can win any season of the Amazing Race with any partner. I think Brooke is more so the higher variance one of the two. I do look at Scott as a calming presence on Brooke most of the time, though there were times that Brooke did help out Scott as well. And I think that's why they were a good duo on this season as a whole, though, again, looking at their record, it's just very mediocre to average for a good chunk of the race, and then they really turn it on at the end. And there were obviously those points where they would have their freakouts and everything, which, I mean, mind you, most teams do. I do think they are more of a mixed bag of just kind of average to mediocre and then like really turning it up. So for me, that's what lands them here at number 27. Now our number 26 is a team that I've always had trouble ranking whenever I got around to these sort of lists, because they are probably the most rocky team in the history of the race. I mean, there probably is one more that we'll talk about, but from season 2 of The Amazing Race, we have Chris and Alex, and what to do with them. I mean, looking at their record, it's really weird. They win 3 legs, but they're also saved by a non-elimination leg twice. Mind you, one of those is the final 3 leg before the finale, and that one, to be honest, I don't really count as much because it's really a pointless leg. Like, it's really there for no reason. And the other leg that they survived, the non-elimination leg, was one where Tara and Will were also with them, and they just let Tara and Will walk by them, essentially, as they were pretty much knew it was a non-elimination leg through how the clue was worded and just the placement in the race. Like, they knew it was going to happen. So that one I don't really knock too much against them. However, if we look at the rest of the race, they were second to last multiple times throughout the race. They were second to last in leg 4. They were second to last both times in the final 4 legs. But they do also come in second a good chunk. They come in second 3 times within the race. As I said, they win 3 legs. So for them, it's very much that they're either on top or they're at the bottom. They're very rarely in the middle. The only times they were in the middle were legs 1 and 3, obviously very early on in the race. So for me, they're a very topsy-turvy team. I think they're a team that really just wins out of brute strength. I mean, they literally just outrun Tara and Will, and that's what gives them the win. They just follow Tara and Will, and then they outrun them. So for me, I don't really have that much confidence in their skill of doing things on their own. I do think they very much get benefited from working with Tara and Will, which really helped them with their flaws, and then they were able to edge them out just through physicality. So I do have a pretty mixed opinion on them as racers as a whole. So for me, they land here at number 26. Now, number 25, we have another team that's very similar to that, in my opinion. That is TK and Rachel, the winners of the Amazing Race 12. And I think they're another team that's very much either on the bottom or on the top. They do squeak on by 2 times, getting second to last in legs 4 and 7. They do come in last at leg 9, get saved by a non-elimination leg, which isn't particularly great, though. By that point in the race, again, it's kind of obvious that there is going to be a non-elimination, but still, it's still not great. But they do win 3 legs. They win 3 out of 11 legs, which, I mean, considering this was a shorter season, that's not that bad. And they do also come in second in 2 other legs. So really, they spend about half the race at the top of the pack, like within first or second place. Even in the first leg, they come in third. So it's like that's over half the race that they're within the top 3. But again, they do get saved by non-elimination. They do squeak on by during a couple rounds. So again, it's a very topsy-turvy race for me. So for me, that lands them at number 25. Now, number 24, we're kind of in a similar tier. Yeah, similar style of results here. We have Jessica and Cody from The Amazing Race 30. And again, another one, in my opinion, that they were either on the top or on the bottom. And Jessica and Cody did have a really rough patch between legs 6 and 9, where they were second to last on each of those legs. I mean, leg 7's kind of weird, where leg 7 was the one where they were paired up with other teams, and they really just get dragged down by the Jessica and, was it Jen? Was it Christie? Whatever. The pair that Jessica was in, that really dragged them down there. But again, that leg doesn't really matter that much, so I'm not really going to factor that in too much. But if we take that leg out, they're within the top 2 in over half of the race. Like, they only win 2 legs, with one of those obviously being the final leg. However, they're in second place 4 times throughout the race, which I do think is very impressive. I do think they're another of these like Brooke and Scott sort of teams where like one member of the team is really great, while the other member is just kind of Like, I think Cody is someone that could probably win any season of The Amazing Race. And I do think there are definitely points where he carries Jessica along. However, and Jessica is the one to figure out the final puzzle that does end up giving them the win. So I do think that is something you have to give her credit for as well. But again, they're another one of these teams that have a very rocky history here of being kind of dominant in about half of the race, but the other half, they're very mediocre. So for me, that lands them at number 24. Now we're number 23. We're on to a bit more of a consistent team, but a team that I never felt like were actually racing that well, and that is Freddy and Kendra. And they're definitely the most consistent team we've talked about so far. I mean, looking at the record, they're only second to last during one leg, and that's leg 6. Outside of that, they do spend about half the race in the middle of the pack, ranging from like 3rd through 8th, like sort of in that range. They do come in second 3 times during the race, and they do win 2 legs, obviously one of those being the final leg. So the actual track record here isn't that bad, especially in comparison to the other teams that we talked about. But I just felt like they were a team that was more prone to making dumb mistakes. I feel like they were a team that were more prone to like irrational freakouts. And I do think they're a team that got very lucky. I mean, I think on that final leg, while I do think you have to give them credit for them actually finding the better flight on the final leg, it's like, I do think that's very much what got them the win. I mean, like, if we were just going based on the tasks that happened there, I think they would have lost if they hadn't gotten that better flight. So I do think luck very much played a part in how they won the game. So for me, I do think luck very much played a part in how they won the game. Mixing that in with the fact that I just don't really have much confidence in them as racers overall. Like, I don't think they really demonstrated that impressive skills over the course of the race. I just feel like they land here at number 23. Now at number 22, we have a team that's actually kind of surprising that they're this high, though, again, I think they're another team that has a very good track record, but if you look at how they actually got there, it's not as impressive, and that is Flo and Zach. And, I mean, this is another team that I think Zach pretty much carried the team, right? I think Zach pretty much carried Flo. I think if it wasn't for Zach, they wouldn't have won the race. I think it was very much Zach being able to be a calming presence to Flo most of the time that allowed him to get as far as they did, and then they were barely able to get the win from there. But they actually had a pretty good track record on the race. I mean, they have 2 saves from non-elimination legs, which is not particularly great, especially with one of them being a second non-elimination leg in a row. I think that's more luck dependent, and the other non-elimination leg was, again, a leg that everyone knew was a non-elimination leg, though Zach pretty much had to spend most of that leg just trying to convince Flo not to quit the race. So, I mean, that's something. But they are a team that they did win only 2 legs. However, they got second place 5 times over the course of the race, which is very impressive. And then they never got below 5th place, which I think is another very impressive element of their race. I mean, their average overall is a 2.69, which is very strong. However, again, if we're looking at how they got there, again, they had 2 non-elimination leg saves, and they had Flo, who was pretty much trying to blow up their game, and Zach just had to scramble to save it and get them back on track. Mind you, I do think Flo is very good at certain elements of the race. Like, I think she's very good at, like, the negotiating, the social element that Zach simply isn't. Well, Zach's obviously very good at the physicality stuff, very good at being a logical thinker. Though I do think there's points, obviously, where Zach is too kind and too caring to other people. That is a major downside of him as well. So they both have their flaws, but I do think they both helped each other overcome each other's flaws. Like, I think they are a very good pair on the race, if only Flo didn't want to quit. So for me, that was enough to put them above Freddy and Kendra. Well, I mean that, and also they just have a much better record as a whole. Now at number 21, we have a team that's in a sort of similar tier. Again, a team that doesn't have a terrible record, but it's mostly how they got there that puts them lower than some of these other teams, and that is Chip and Kim. And I love Chip and Kim as characters. I think they're fantastic characters, and they actually have a decent record at points. Again, they have 4 wins, which is much better than any of the other teams we've talked about so far. They have 2 second-place finishes. They only come in second to last once throughout the race, but they have a very rocky start. Those first 3 legs are bad. I mean, they get 8th, and 7th, and that first round is so terrible for them, where they just completely miss the task and then go to the finish line and then realize, like, oh, we didn't go to the task, we have to go all the way back. And that's not particularly great. Mind you, again, that was the first leg, so that's something that I can look past, but I think probably the bigger knock for me against them is how they won the final leg, where they essentially won the final leg by being so bad. I mean, they were so bad at the first half of the leg that they were last to the airport, and through being last, they were able to find out that the flights that Colin Christie and Brennan and Nicole got on were delayed, while obviously they were sleeping, resting for the next day. And again, this is so luck dependent. The fact that they were so bad that they won the race. That's essentially how this happened. And again, while the rest of their race is okay, like it's actually pretty solid. Again, 3 wins before that, 3 second place finishes. They did make a strategic move in yielding Colin and Christie. And again, there is impressive stuff within their race. However, again, the fact that they win that way for me is a knock against them, and they land here at number 21. Now at number 20, we're on to a team that I just look at as very average overall. Like, I don't think they did anything really well, but I don't feel like they did much that's a really massive knock against them either, and that is Uchenna and Joyce. And I mean, again, looking at their record, they have a solid record. I mean, they won 3 legs, mind you, one of them was the final one. They got second place in another leg, and then were just pretty average the rest of the way. I mean, they were second to last in the 5th leg, and they were second to last in the 10th leg, and did actually come in last on the penultimate leg, though again, that's one that everyone knew was a non-elimination leg, so it doesn't really matter. But overall, I just feel like they were average racers on that season. I think Boston Rob and Amber were better racers overall. Even Ron and Kelly, I think they were probably the worst racers of that final 3, just as a general concept. However, I do think all 3 of those teams were pretty solid. Again, Uchenna and Joyce have a decent record. They have a very average record without any massive flaws, in my opinion, to really knock them down. And I do think they're one of these teams that was very good with the locals, very good at getting their way at points through the interactions with the locals. I mean, they literally win the race through a taxi driver allowing them to not pay him. Like, that's literally how they win. So again, Uchenna and Joyce, for me, very average team overall. Not much to really knock against their win, but not really much to really prop it up either. They're here at number 20. Now, number 19, we have a team another one that's always been tough to rank for me, and that is Reichen Chip from The Amazing Race 4. And again, they're another team that I always look at as a dominant team, but when you look at their actual record, they're just very average. I mean, they only win 2 legs, with one of those obviously being the final one. They do get second to last a couple times in leg 7 and leg 11. However, outside of that, they're very much just middle of the pack, or they do get second place 4 times. But again, they're just never really a dominant force on the season, despite the show kind of portraying them as that. I mean, they were a very strategic team. They were willing to cut other people and make strategic moves against other people. And for me, that element of it is impressive, though at the same time, they were shown to be just kind of jerks at points. I mean, they were shown to just be dicks to certain other teams, and I don't think that's great either. I mean, they do spend about half the race in the top 2, which is, again, that's pretty solid, but they spend a lot of the other part of the race either in the middle of the pack or towards the bottom of the pack. So they're kind of another one of those teams that's kind of tough to rank, but I do think they spend more time in the upper echelon than some of these other teams that we've already talked about. So for me, they land at number 19. Now at number 18, we're moving on to a team that is another one I just don't have many flaws with, but again, not really many pros either, and that is Laura and Tyler from The Amazing Race 26. And they're another team with a relatively solid record. They do come in second to last 4 times throughout the race. But again, never survive a non-elimination leg, so that's good. They do win 3 legs. Mind you, the 2 legs they win before the final leg were in a row. And they do spend a lot of the rest of the race just kind of middle of the pack. They do come in second twice. I mean, it's just kind of a very average race overall, and just one without many flaws, in my opinion. I just feel like they were a mostly consistent team. So for me, they land at number 18. Now at number 17, we have a team that I really wanted to put higher, and I really thought I was going to put higher, because I feel like a lot of people hold this team in very high regard, but then I just didn't feel like I could when really analyzing their race, and that is Nat and Kat, the winners of The Amazing Race 17. And this is a weird team where, again, they win 5 legs, which is a lot. I mean, they either win or come in second through half of the race. However, they also come in second to last 3 times within the race. And I think they are a team that is prone to making some massive mistakes. I mean, even earlier on, leg 3, they almost get eliminated. They come in second to last leg 8, leg 11. Like, it's really throughout the race, which I think is more so indicative of them just being prone to making mistakes than if it was just like a bad streak in the middle of the race or something like that. They're just another team that, in my opinion, like, they're either on the top or they're on the bottom. Like, they're very rarely in the middle of the pack. On their actual season, I just don't feel like their race was really indicative of higher placement here, despite them, again, I think they're looked at as a very strong team. I think coming into any random season, I do think they are probably a stronger team than some teams that we will be talking about in a little bit, but I think just by their record and based on how they actually race the race on that season, I do think they are more prone to mistakes and have a rockier record than some of the teams we'll be talking about later, probably with the exception of one that I've been foreshadowing for a while. But for me, Nat and Kat land here at number 17. And now number 16, we have another team that, in my opinion, is very prone to mistakes, but I do think as a whole they were more consistent throughout the race, and that is Tyler and James from The Amazing Race 10. And they're another team that had won a decent amount of legs. They won 4 legs. However, they did also come in second 4 times throughout the race. That means out of the 12 legs, they spent 8 of those legs in the top 2, and I do think that is very impressive. However, they're also a team that came second to last 3 times throughout the race, and 2 of those times being towards the middle of the race in legs 5 and 6, and they very much get saved in leg 6 by Peter and Sarah just having a complete breakdown during that leg. But I do feel like overall as a team they were much more of a dominant force throughout the race than like Nat and Kat, where again their average on the race is a 2.5, which is very, very impressive compared to like Nat and Kat, who have an average above 3. So, I mean, for me, that it was the main sticking point for me that put them above Nat and Kat, even though I do think they are both just as prone to mistakes. But I just felt like Tyler and James had a better record overall, so they land here at number 16. Now, number 15, we have another team that I just kind of look at as very average overall as well. Again, I do think they are probably a strong team overall, but again, another one that's prone to mishaps, but also just didn't have as big of a fall as the teams that we've already talked about, and that is Dana and Matt from season 28. Now, Dana and Matt's a team that only won 2 legs, the first leg of the race and the final leg of the race, and only came in second on the penultimate leg of the race. However, they never really were towards the bottom of the pack. I mean, yes, they came in 5th during leg 8 where there were only 6 teams, but it was a non-elimination leg, and that was only a one-time occurrence. Every other leg, they were either in 3rd or 4th. They never got a placement below 5th place. I mean, like, I do think that is a very impressive element of their race, that they were so consistent the entire way through. Now, they are prone to mistakes, and they are prone to a lot of arguments. We did see Dana yelling at Matt a lot, but that never seemed to really affect how they raced throughout the season. Again, they were very consistent the entire way through. So while they do have like worse averages than Nat and Kat and Tyler and James that we just talked about, I felt like they were just a more consistent team overall. So for me, they landed at number 15. Now, number 14, this is kind of a weird one to talk about. We have the Linz Family from the Amazing Race Family Edition. And yeah, I mean, like, if we look at their record, they're actually a very strong team. Like, they had a very weak first leg where they barely survived there. They come second to last on the first leg, but after that, they never go below 4th place, and they really spend most of the race in 1st, 2nd, or 3rd. They literally get 1st, 2nd, or 3rd on 9 out of the 11 legs, and they get 1st or 2nd in 7 out of the 11 legs. Like, that's a very impressive record. They have an average of 2.82, and while they don't really win many legs, they only win 2 legs, the 9th leg and the final leg. I just feel like they're a very consistent team overall. Like, yes, they had that big mess up at the very, very beginning, but after that, they were just very consistently strong. They never really had inner turmoil at all. They were just a very good team. Like, I think they were just a very consistent team. So for me, that lands them at number 14. Now at number 13, we have a very similar team to that, and that is Kisha and Jen, the winners of the Amazing Race Unfinished Business. And again, like, they don't have the greatest average in the world. Their average is a 3.33. However, their race is very solid. They spend the first 8 legs towards the upper middle of the pack with a bevy of like 3rd, 4th place finishes. Sometimes they get 5th and 6th, which aren't particularly great, but it's mostly 3rd and 4th place finishes. But then they really kick it up towards the end. I mean, legs 9 through 11, they get 2nd place each of those times, and obviously they win the final leg. I just feel like they're another one of these teams that are just super consistent the entire way through. They never really had a misstep the entire way through, but at the same time, they weren't like a massively dominant force. So I didn't feel like they were really justified to be in that top tier, but I do feel like they were above a lot of these other teams that made massive mistakes throughout their race. So for me, that lands them here at number 13. Now at number 12. At number 12, we have another very consistent team, and that is the winners of the Amazing Race 27, Kelsey and Joey. And again, a very impressive record here. Again, we're looking at another team that, I mean, they had a rocky start a bit. I mean, they got 8th and 7th in the first 2 legs. That's not particularly great. But then after that, 3rd, 4th, 4th, 3rd in legs 3 through 6. And then consistently gets 5 second place finishes in a row in legs 7 through 11, and then win the final leg. And again, a very consistent team. Another team that I think made very few mistakes. Another team with a very mediocre average of a 3.33. They were just another one of these teams I just felt like were very consistent the entire way through without much to knock against them. So for me, they landed at number 12. Now at number 11, we have another team that's kind of similar to that. Was a bit more dominant, I feel like, throughout the race, and that is Jason and Amy. Now, Jason and Amy, another team that had a kind of rocky first leg. They get 8th place out of 11 there, but after that, they're pretty consistent the entire way through. They get 3rd place and 2 5th place finishes, but outside of that, they get 6 2nd place finishes and 2 1st place finishes towards the end of the race, obviously one being the final leg. But now they're just really consistent team throughout the race. Again, average of a 2.92, certainly above those last couple teams that we've talked about. Again, we're very much within the top 2 for a good chunk of the race. Again, 8 out of the 12 legs. Something I do remember that I would consider a misstep from them, though, is I do think they were too loyal to their alliances. I remember there were points where they were helping out Nicole and Travis at points that it wasn't beneficial for them to help them out. And that is a knock against them personally, but it's like still, they raced an extremely consistent race even without that. So despite like the minor strategical missteps that I feel like they make, I do think their race overall was very strong, so they land at number 11. Now at number 10, we have another really consistent team, and a team that I feel like would have been extremely dominant had it not been for another team on this season, and that is Ernie and Cindy. And I think they're a team that, if it wasn't for Andy and Tommy being on this season, I think they would have been looked at as a much better team overall, despite them already, again, being a very strong team. Their average is at 2.83, pretty solid. They do win 3 legs. They get second in 3 other legs. And one of those second place finishes was literally a foot race with Andy and Tommy. And outside of that, I mean, they come in third a couple times. They get a 4th place finish, 3 5th place finishes earlier on in the race. Again, they never get a placement below 5th place, which is just impressive in general. Again, just another very consistent team. I do think they're both pretty strong racers. They both have things that they're good at that help out the other one that aren't as strong in those certain things. So I do think overall they're a very solid team, have very solid results. For me, that's enough to land here at number 10. Now at number 9, and I think from this point on, we're on to the more dominant teams of the Amazing Race. I mean, this one probably a little bit less so than the rest, but I still think a pretty dominant run here, and that is Colin and Christie from Reality Showdown. Again, their average is very strong in this season. They get a 2.42, very impressive. They never get a leg below 4th place, which again, completely mind-blowing. And again, the 2.42 average is with only 3 first place finishes and 3 second place finishes. So I think that really just shows how consistent of a team they really were. Again, they spent half the race in 1st or 2nd place, and the rest with 4 3rd place finishes, 2 4th place finishes. The only time they were ever in trouble was in that penultimate leg, where they do come in 3rd on the final 4 leg, where they do make a massive mistake earlier on in the leg at the roadblock. But I mean, outside of that, they perform pretty strong. They're able to recover. They're able to pass Nicole and Victor. And I think overall they just raced extremely well on that season. They raced pretty consistently the entire way through. The only knock against them for me at this point in the list here is that they're not as outwardly dominant as the rest of the teams. Again, the final 8 teams that we're about to talk about were in first place for a good chunk of their seasons, while Colin and Christie again were like kind of 1st, 2nd place. They were just like another team that was consistently towards the top, but were rarely at 1st place. So I think that's the biggest knock against them for me at this point in the list here. So for me, they're at number 9. And now at number 8, we have what might be a bit of a controversial one, because I struggle with this one myself, because I think this team had one of the most dominant beginnings of any season, and also one of the most dominant endings to any season, but they had such a rocky mid-game, and that is BJ and Tyler. And I really didn't know what to do with them, because again, they had such a dominant beginning of the race where they're going back and forth 1st and 2nd place with Eric and Jeremy. They get 1st place twice there, 2nd place 3 times, just going back and forth between the two, and they're leaps and bounds above every other team on the season. But then they have a pretty big misstep on episode 6. They fall all the way to 5th place out of 6, and they survive a non-elimination leg in the 7th leg, which isn't great. They kind of rebound a bit, get 3rd place in leg 8, but then they fall again, leg 9. But then again, that was a very thrilling finish where the 3 teams that were at the bottom were all at the finish line at the same time. It was all coming down to a race, and they just lost that race. But again, it was a non-elimination leg, and then after that, they dominate the rest of the way. They get 1st place 3 times in a row. So again, it's such a weird team to rank, where they have a very dominant beginning, very dominant end, but such a messy middle. And I really struggle on where to put them. Do I put them down with the Chip and Kims, who in my opinion have just as many flaws as BJ and Tyler? But I just didn't feel right about it, because I felt like BJ and Tyler were just so much more dominant at other points in the season. So to reconcile all this, I did end up putting them here at the bottom of the dominant tier, essentially, of this list, the final 8. Now at number 7, we have another, again, extremely dominant team in my opinion, but again, another one that was prone to some mistakes, and that is Bates and Anthony. And this is another team that was pretty tough to rank for me, because it's do I rank them in this dominant tier, or do I rank them in that kind of lesser tier of kind of messy dominance where the Tyler and James and the Nat and Cats are? And I decided to put them this high on the list because if you really look at their track record, there was never really a point where they were close to getting eliminated. Yes, they had mistakes. Yes, they got 7th in the 4th leg. Yes, they came 2nd to last in leg 9 due to mistakes that they made. But outside of that, they were very consistent the rest of the way through. And mind you, that leg 9 was a non-elimination leg anyway. But I mean, they win 5 legs. They get 2nd place in 3 other legs, which means, again, they're in the top 2 for 8 out of the 12 legs. And even outside of that, they get 3rd place in a leg. They get 4th place at the final 8. So again, very solid positions there. So for me, I felt like those were more dominant stats than what we would see from like Tyler and James, where they are second to last 3 times, or Nat and Kat, who, I mean, same thing, second to last 3 times, and also some kind of mediocre positions outside of that. I feel like Bates and Anthony were just more dominant for more of the race, more consistent for more of the race, despite also having that ability to make mistakes that those other teams would also have. I just felt like for me, Bates and Anthony, I just considered them better racers than those other teams, had more impressive stats. So for me, they land here at number 7. Now at number 6, we have a team that I was very impressed by when watching their season. And they also have very impressive stats, though they do have a massive misstep, and that is Tammy and Victor. And really the main thing keeping them out of the top 5 here is their leg 3. I mean, their leg 3 is very bad. They come in second to last. They barely survive there. And it's largely due to their own fault. I mean, they spend a lot of that leg just arguing with each other. And I do think they get very lucky that they're not eliminated there. Though, I do think that really repairs their relationship in a way that allows for them to dominate the rest of the race. Because if we're looking at the 11 legs here, they do get that one leg where they're in 8th place. But outside of that, they're in the top 3 every other leg. And again, they have a top 2 finish in 8 out of the 11 legs. They do win 5 legs. They have an average of a 2.27. Again, a very impressive race overall. I think they're just another team that, like, outside of that one leg, I think they were just consistent the rest of the time. They performed very well. They were very well acclimated to the challenges that the Amazing Race usually brings up. I just feel like they had that one misstep that kind of keeps them out of the top tier. So for me, they land at number 6. Now at number 5, we're at the first winners of the Amazing Race ever, and we have Rob and Brennan. And again, I just think they're extremely dominant, extremely consistent team. I feel like they never had the down spot that Tammy and Victor ever had. I mean, yes, they get like 6th place in leg 4. But outside of that, and also, I mean, a 4th place finish in leg 5, they're in the top 3 the rest of the way. Again, they're in the top 3 for 11 out of the 13 legs, getting 3rd place 5 times on the season. And they also win 5 legs throughout the season, with 4 of those being 4 of the final 5 legs in the race, with the other placement being a 2nd place finish. So again, extremely dominant race. They dominate that first leg. They pretty much dominate the end game of the race, and they're very much middle of the pack in the middle. I think they're just a very consistent team overall. I don't think they made many mistakes throughout the entire way. Again, for me, just a very consistently dominant team of the race. They land at number 5. Now, number 4, we have a team that is looked at as like one of the most dominant teams in the history of the Amazing Race. And obviously, I agree. I mean, they're in the top 4. But I do think out of the top 4 here, they're obviously the one that made the most mistakes, in my opinion. That is Nick and Starr. And I mean, their track record is incredible. I mean, the fact that they win 7 out of 11 legs is ridiculous. Like, that is extremely impressive. However, they do also have kind of a rocky period outside of those wins. I mean, if we're looking at legs 2 through 4, they get 6th, 6th, and 5th. Kind of mediocre placements there. And while obviously they do rebound, like they win 4 legs in a row immediately after that, I think those style of placements aren't things that we see from the top 3 winners, in my opinion. And mixing that in with a 3rd place finish, a 2nd to last finish in leg 9, which, while that was a non-elimination leg, still isn't great. And a lot of that was due to mistakes that they made. So, I mean, for me, I do look at them as a team that is more prone to mistakes than the other 3 teams that we will be talking about. So while they do have a very, very impressive record of, again, 7 wins out of 11 legs, I do think there are minor missteps there that keep them out of the top 3. Now at number 3, we're on to a team that, again, this was the debate for me over them or Nick and Starr, because I do think Nick and Starr, when they dominated, were more dominant than this team. But again, I think this team made less mistakes and were still extremely dominant, and that is Dave and Connor from the Amazing Race All-Stars 2. And again, a very dominant race here. Again, they won 6 legs out of 12, including the final 4 legs of the race. They got 2nd place on another one, and the rest of the legs were 3rd or 4th place finishes. Again, very impressive race overall. Have an average of 2.17, which is higher than Nick and Starr's. Nick and Starr's is a 2.45. So again, like Dave and Connor, just for me, again, very consistent team. Just not really much negative to say about them. They just had a very strong performance overall. Again, won half the legs on the season. I do think you can make qualms with how they acted on the race, with obviously them acting really indignant at points, acting like they were better than like Brendan and Rachel was the main team that they would berate. But still, it's like when we look at the race results and how they raced, I do think they raced pretty well. They were able to recover from U-turns and stuff. So it's like I don't have much faults with how they raced throughout the season. They land at number 3. Now at number 2, and again, these top 2 should be pretty obvious at this point. I think these 2 are clearly 2 of the most dominant teams in the history of the race. Though I do actually think it's very close between these 2. It was actually very tough to really distinguish for me which one I should put at number 1, because I do think we have one team that is very clearly more dominant, while we have another team that's probably more consistent. I did decide to go with the more dominant team at number 1, so at number 2 here, the more consistent team in my opinion is Meghan and Cheyne. Now, I do think this is a very close race here. I think Meghan and Cheyne might be the most consistent racers in the history of the race. I mean, yes, they get a 6th place finish in leg 2, a 5th place finish in leg 4. Outside of that, though, they're in the top 2 for 10 out of the 12 legs, with a win in 7 out of the 12 legs. Again, very impressive. 2nd place finish in 3 of them. Average of a 2.0. A very dominant race overall. I think they really just blew everyone else out of the water. They never really had any major missteps. I mean, they did get into arguments here and there, but I think for the most part, again, they were just extremely dominant, very good at working with each other. They were very good at fulfilling the other person's flaws. Like, they were pretty much a perfect team. Like, I think I might do this video down the road of ranking the best teams ever. I think Meghan and Cheyne truly have a possibility of being the best Amazing Race team ever. And again, for me, though, they do have that 5th place finish. They have that 6th place finish. It is very close. Like, it's extremely close between Meghan and Cheyne and the team at number 1. To the point where, again, like, it literally came down to placements. Like, the team at number 1 has better placements overall. And while that's a very minor thing, I do think these 2 teams are so close that I did allow that to decide who is at number 1. So for me, Meghan and Cheyne were at number 2. But at number 1, I mean, I think it's pretty obvious, right? It has to be at this point Rachel and Dave. And this is very tough because, again, it's so close between the 2 teams for me. Because if we look at Rachel and Dave, their record, again, 8 wins, the record, a really ridiculous number. Again, winning 8 out of the 12 legs, coming in 2nd place in 2 other legs, meaning that, again, just like Meghan and Cheyne, they were in the top 2 for 10 out of the 12 legs, though they do win 1 more leg than Meghan and Cheyne do. The other 2 placements are just like Meghan and Cheyne. They have a 6th place finish, though Rachel and Dave have a 4th place finish instead of a 5th place finish that Meghan and Cheyne do. Again, their races are very, very similar. I do think Rachel and Dave had a bigger blow up than Meghan and Cheyne ever did. Yes, Meghan and Cheyne got into like one argument throughout the race, but Rachel and Dave, like, they would argue the entire time. And they had that really massive one that really could have harmed their game when they were like building that tent and everything, and that's not great. And that's why I do think overall Meghan and Cheyne are probably better racers as a whole. But I think if we're just looking at sheer dominance of the race, just how great they were on that one specific season, I do think Rachel and Dave just edge it out, especially because I feel like Rachel and Dave had much stronger competition as well. Again, Art and JJ are not a team to be trifled with there, yet they beat them consistently every single leg in that end game. And same thing goes for like Brennan and Rachel, who I think are a pretty decent team as well. So I mean, I think Rachel and Dave had much stronger competition. I think they also had a much tougher race, if I remember right. I mean, Amazing Race 20 was a very brutal course. And for them to be that dominant on that tough of a course with as tough of competition, I do feel like for me is more impressive. So for me, that's what puts Rachel and Dave at number 1. So there we go. Those are my rankings for the Amazing Race winners. Again, I've been really holding this one off for a while. And to be honest, I've been holding off Amazing Race videos for a while. And I do apologize for not doing as many Amazing Race videos, especially because there was a period earlier on this year where I was doing so many of them. I just kind of got burnt out, if I'm being honest. I mean, I was very much into Amazing Race for a while. Obviously, Amazing Race 31 aired last year. When that happened, I decided to do a full series rewatch. I then rewatched the seasons again immediately afterwards for that revisiting series. I did a whole bunch of Amazing Race videos, and to be honest, I just got really burnt out. So that's why I took that break, and now I don't know if I'm really going to be back with a whole bunch of Amazing Race videos, but at least I did this winner ranking, a video that I did say I was going to do for a while now. I would still like to get into Amazing Race Canada. I still haven't done that, despite me mentioning that probably like a year ago now that I was going to do it. if I do ever get around to it, obviously you'll see a video on that. You'll see videos possibly on other Amazing Race things when I come around to it. So I'm not going to fully commit to doing more Amazing Race videos, but I would like to do more in the future. Though I feel like for me personally, Amazing Race is something that I have to be in the mood for. Unlike Big Brother and Survivor, something that I'm always like consistently into. Amazing Race is kind of something that is kind of on a tier below that for me personally. But either way, that is the video. That is my ranking of every winner of the Amazing Race US. Thank you for watching.